All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? For folks who don't know me, I'm Dara. I am on the community team here at Flatiron School. I will be sort of like your host and MC for this event. Um, and we have Joey with us today. He is a product designer here at Flatiron School, and he has very generously agreed to spend some time today sharing a little bit of his career journey from the music industry into product design. Before I kind of pass the virtual mic over to him, just really quickly, he'll be kind of chatting and talking for, I think, around 15, 20 minutes. And then as folks have questions, if you could pop them into the Q&A, that will help me kind of keep track of them. And then when Joey's kind of done chatting, we'll kind of go through questions. I'm betting that I will have some questions of my own as well to mix in there. So please use that Q&A, because if we put them in the chat, sometimes they get lost. So there should be a Q&A button down in the bottom menu of your Zoom screen. You can just click on that and submit your questions there. And with the admin out of the way, Joey, I will officially pass it over to you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dara. I appreciate it. It feels cool to be in this position because I remember when I first got started, like how much new information there is to learn, and just how like confusing it can be at first. And like, it feels great to sort of be in a position now after doing this for a little bit where I can actually help others who are, like myself not that long ago, just by sharing my story and just kind of giving you, telling you all about my experience and also like answering some questions. Sorry if it feels like I'm a little off center. I have my monitor here just so I can like see better and look at some notes as I go through these. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I'll just talk, hopefully not too long. I prepared some like answers to these questions that I could go back to in case I ramble a little bit. So I'm just gonna get into it and we'll see. Maybe it'll be like 25, 30 minutes or less. Let's find out. So these are some questions that Dara had sent over to me just because it was nice to have a little bit of like a guide of what to talk about. So I'll kind of like use these as like a skeleton or like a base of today's webinar. So the first question is, can you share a little bit about your career journey as a product designer? And so like just starting with when I got into product design, I was initially pretty interested in software development and software engineering, but and I'll get more into that in a little bit, just because it's kind of technical, and coming from a music background, it's very technical as well. So that was kind of my initial interest. And I did more digging around on the internet. I looked around on Reddit, and I reached out to strangers on Reddit, basically like trying to find anyone I could talk to who would want to talk to me about product design, about UX, UI design. Back then, I didn't know what product design was. I just thought it was UX, UI design, even though they're pretty much the same thing roughly. But anyway, just trying to find out more information about it was the very first step. That was probably about a month or two. And then I ended up finding somebody on Facebook, one of my friends who went through a boot camp. He said he went through Springboard and he loved it and he was going to be down to talk to me. So, long story short, like that was a great call. It convinced me to take the boot camp route. And I got started in August of 2020 with Springboard. And that was about a year long. So it's a 9-month program to a year long. Definitely just depends on how fast you can get it done. So that was great. It was very immersive, very structured curriculum. It was nice because it was like one-on-one with a mentor each week. And my mentor was great. He used to work, right? He did work at Google. And, like projects, we had capstones that we would do. We pretty much would come up with the type of capstone we wanted to do, and he would help kind of guide that process, or the mentor would help guide that process. We had a design sprint, which I'm not sure where you guys are at, if you're students here, if you're deep into the curriculum at Flatiron, or if you're just getting started. And I know some people are just interested in general, but a design sprint is just, let's not get into that. That it's a very short method that a lot of companies use, and maybe it's like a week or two of like a process of coming up with a finalized design, and it's like very structured. But anyway, there's a design sprint, there's capstones, and then there was an industry design project, which is like kind of nice because you're working with an actual client, pretty much like an internship. You know, it's not paid, but it is a real life experience that you can use to help get your first job. So that was a boot camp, and then I graduated and spent about 3 months applying to jobs. And so that was, you know, a little bit tough. That's kind of a long time. And that's pretty normal. You know, I would say like you might be looking at, you know, as short as a month or two, and maybe 6 months or longer before you land your first job. It's just very saturated, and we'll get into that in a little bit too. I definitely want to talk about that. But I realized that at that point, that it would be really great to get some more experience under my belt. And so, you know, I kind of reluctantly worked for a startup. Like I wanted to like hopefully get a paying job pretty quickly, but I realized that it's beneficial to just get some more experience, worked for free for a startup, and use that as leverage to land my first job. My first job was at JP Morgan Chase. That was in November of last year. You know, outside of the startup experience, that was a contract position. And then that ended. That was a 3-month contract. I was back on the job hunt. And after about a couple months, I landed at Flatiron. So that's where I am now. So it's definitely been quite a journey. Just getting started, though. I'm sure it's, you know, we all have long journeys in our careers. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Moving on to the next question, what has been your path to this point? So like, you know, I'm about 29 years old. I know I look a lot younger than that, you know, even with the mustache. But so before that, I had a pretty, you know, long career, I guess, ever since I graduated from college. I have had a career in music. I graduated in about January 2016 from the University of Georgia. And I had my major was in management, and I had a certificate in music business. So I was going to pair those two together to work in the music industry. And I looked at jobs like as a booking agent and manager and all this stuff. And I also just considered like taking a job from the various opportunities that were at my job fair at college, in college, of like lots of business type of jobs. But when I finally like got close to graduating and I actually graduated, I felt this like huge calling to like go into music, go all in on music instead of take a job. And so that's just what I did. It didn't feel right to me at the time to just take a job I wasn't stoked about. It almost felt like, okay, I'm finally done with school. Like now I'm free. Like I'm going to live my life how I want. But also like school is super important as well and shaped a lot of things. So that's what I did. I did that for like 5 or 6 years. What that means is, so I know how to make music on the computer, and I like decided I would focus on that, self-release music. I started playing shows like as a solo performer. I play drums as well, so I would kind of incorporate that and DJ. And then once I realized I had like the DJ skills, I translated that into starting my own business, doing a lot of like weddings and private events. And that was really great because then I could actually sort of be self-sufficient with music and be able to do that for a while. So that was fun. And then, you know, another big life change, I'm sure you guys can relate, is the pandemic happening in 2020. That was a huge shift in just sort of a good time for me to consider other things. Like I'd been doing this for a while, like what else is out there? What else can I learn? And so I was really interested in that. Long story short, because music production is very technical, that kind of got me into thinking about other tech jobs. So that's sort of like my story of how I got into it. So what drew you to product design? This is the third question. What drew you to product design? I would definitely like to hear what drew you guys to product design, but it's a technical job. It's a technical career, maybe not as technical as software engineering and other types of things, but I knew that I had a knack for that because I taught myself a lot about music production. I didn't mind being at the computer. You know, when you're in music, you're at a computer, you're locked in and you're focused, and that's like pretty much what you're doing in product design a lot of the time. So I thought that would be a fit. And it's definitely creative, you know, like making music is starting with a blank canvas and you have complete ambiguity and you have to somehow form a full track out of that slowly, block by block, through a lot of iteration. And that's kind of how product design works in a lot of ways. Like they're definitely different. It's definitely a different type of creativity and even less creativity potentially in product design than in music, because you have a lot of other things you have to consider. But it's like kind of similar in some ways. So it all seemed like a really fun thing to do. I also was sort of into product design before I even realized, like I sort of had some skills with it before I realized it at the time. And that was just because as an artist, you have to have like a brand image. You have to put out a lot of merch. I had like a certain aesthetic I was going for. So I just had like at least an idea of visual design. I didn't have any visual design experience or graphic design experience. In product design, you know, I'm sure you guys will find it's really collaborative. So you can you can work together on a team. I knew there was a big team component to product design, to UX UI design, and we would be building things together, and I would be getting feedback. And that sounded really good coming from my current position, where most music producers are very siloed. You're pretty isolated, and you're focusing on your ideas, and doing that for a while, you know, you're kind of you might be looking for something else. I was definitely looking for more of a team environment, I think, at that time too. So that's definitely good to consider. Oh, my biggest challenge as a product designer, I skipped over that question that I had an answer to. Biggest challenge as a product designer. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind for this question is like, you guys will find that when you get started, when you get your first job, and even when you're in the boot camp or not in a boot camp, there's so much ambiguity to what you're doing. Like you first have to like do a lot of research, then you have to try to identify the problem, then you have to reshape the problem, really understand it, then you have to start building. But maybe while you start building a solution to that problem, you slowly like change your lane a little bit. So there's so much like ambiguity involved, which is challenging and scary, especially in the beginning. But I think everyone feels that. Even as like senior designers, you probably feel that way. So just kind of embrace that and know that that's all part of it. Like that's all normal. And I see some good questions here, and I'm sure we'll definitely get to those. Okay, so the next question is, what is your favorite project you've worked on? So yeah, so honestly, like being a Flatiron and being a product designer here has been awesome. Like I've been waiting so long to finally have this role where I'm actually doing like product design work, and I have an awesome manager and an awesome like senior designer that I can bounce things off of. That's really been my favorite so far, because it finally feels like not a personal project, but actually like helping to build a real solution and product, and help students. Like what I'm hopefully trying to do today is just help junior designers and bootcamp interested designers to understand what this is and how it's awesome. It's a great career. But back to I don't know how interesting this is, but I'll just say it really quick. So back to when I was in the boot camp, my favorite project was like the last thing I worked on. This was, you know, everything was starting to click because I had done 3 projects and this was the 4th. And this was a mobile app that had, you know, probably like 8 screens or something. It was called Many Hats, and it's a mobile app that like focuses on solving the problem. How do freelancers budget their money and see like how much income they're making each month, how much they're spending each month, and where is that income coming from? So like somebody who has many hats as a freelancer might be a graphic designer, they might be a product designer, and they might have a lot of projects that they're working on each month, but they don't know what's making them the most money, what to double down on, where their money is going in and out. And so that was kind of the goal of like that app, was to focus on that user group. But anyway, let's move on to another one. I think we have like a couple more questions here. So what advice would you share with someone interested in product design that doesn't have a tech background? So I think this is a great one. I had zero experience before I started at Springboard, absolutely zero. Like from a tech background or even from a design background. Oftentimes you'll see psychologists interested in UX UI design. You'll see graphic designers. You'll see, mostly I would say there's a lot of people interested in it, but there wasn't a ton of music producers when I was getting started, or like musicians that were interested. And now that I've been doing this for like a year and a half or whatever, definitely seen more like musicians and music producers interested, which is great. But honestly, like anyone is a fit for this job without a tech background. Like, don't let that hold you back. No, I'm not gonna say anyone is a fit for this job. Like, obviously, you should know yourself, and you should see what your strengths and weaknesses are, and see if that's a good fit. But yeah, anyone can do it. Like, you don't need experience, is kind of what I'm saying. So I didn't have any visual design experience. I wasn't a graphic designer. And at this point, like, I can safely say I can do a little bit of graphic design work that I'm happy with. And it's just like really awesome to level up your skill sets, in a way, and see it all start to click. I remember that just being so exciting when I was getting started in my boot camp. Is like you don't really know anything, and then all of a sudden you're learning about all these things, you're putting it into practice, and these are really important skills that you can help that can get you a good job, and you can even freelance these skills, because I mean, we live in a digital world now. So yeah, and like one of the coolest things about getting into this career is it kind of changes the way you look at the digital world, because obviously you use your phone all the time. You're streaming TV shows on your smart TV all the time. You're on your computer, and so you can't really get away from all these experiences. Like, they're caked into our everyday life. So it feels cool to be able to understand that and have an opinion on that. And like, when you're using an app, you can see for yourself, how do I like this? Like, does this make sense to me? How could this be improved? And you really start to notice that stuff once you learn a bit about product design. And I think that's really cool too. And yeah, you can really just solve some big problems as a designer in today's world, and you can help a lot of people out with your problem solving. So I think that's cool. Okay, so I did want to have a little section here where I talk about, I'm sure a lot of you guys are interested. I was very interested in this, and that is, okay, so am I going to get a job? Like, if I do a boot camp, am I going to get hired? How long before I get hired? What do I have to do to get hired? Yeah, all that stuff is great, and I definitely want to hear like questions on that. But it is tough. It's definitely tough. So I don't want to like sugarcoat that. Like, regardless of doing a boot camp or not, it takes a lot of work to, first of all, like for me personally, like shift into a completely different career. But even just to like put in all the work to finish the boot camp, and not just do the bare minimum in the boot camp, but really give it your all in your projects, because ultimately your projects shape your portfolio. Your portfolio is a presentation of your work, and like that, if you do the bare minimum throughout the boot camp, that'll be reflected in your portfolio. So it's really about like putting your best foot out there with when you're interviewing with your portfolio, and just being patient. Like I literally had to apply to over 100 jobs. I applied to about 100 in the first 3 months, and then again I had 2 months of interviewing before this job, so well over 100 applications. Didn't hear back on most of those. A lot of those are like LinkedIn job opportunities where you kind of cold apply to those, and that's very hard to, like, unless you have a lot of awesome experience, unless you're very senior, I think that's kind of hard to even hear back on those, because there's so many people applying. So just want to like really be honest about that. A really good foot in the door, I'm kind of deviating from my list now, but like a really good foot in the door is to work with recruiters on LinkedIn. They're definitely an asset to you. Like, so don't brush them off, and definitely try to respond to most of them or all of them in the beginning, because they're the ones that can advocate for you to get your foot in the door to actually have that first interview. That's how I got this job, and it's definitely helpful. And if you have some experience, you have a little bit of experience outside of your boot camp, whether that's with a startup or freelancing or even personal projects outside of the boot camp, that's going to help you with your portfolio and with like showing that you have some experience before that first role. So yeah, happy to talk more about that. One more thing I want to get into is some resources I can recommend. So there's some really great resources that have helped me out, and I've told a lot of people about them that are my friends that are interested in design. Check out Mizco on YouTube. I wish I could like easily link in the chat. Actually, maybe I can really quick. Give me 1 second. So this guy is really, really good designer that's taught me so much. He's also got some products. So I'll just like link a video of his really quick.
It's not web creators. It's
yeah. So this guy is like really, really knowledgeable and helpful. He's got lots of free videos on YouTube. The course that I highly recommend, it's paid, but it's worth it, is called the Ultimate Figma Masterclass. And that's just like a Figma masterclass where he literally teaches you all the foundations in Figma, and he's really good at it. So Figma is like one of your best assets as a designer. I know some of you might not use Figma, you might use Sketch and other programs, but I got started with Figma, so that's kind of what I've used to leverage like my design skills. And I highly recommend if you're using Figma that you check that out. Let's see. Yeah, and like I was saying, a lot of times it's really nice to be really great with Figma, because a lot of times hiring managers, when they're looking at your portfolio, they're just quickly scanning. They're super busy and they're looking at so many applications. So if you have a really solid visual design that just like looks good immediately, that's going to really help you get your foot in the door too. Just so that you can start interviewing. So here's a book. I'm not like a avid book pusher for design, because I really believe in like actually doing design to like level up mostly. But this book helped shape my understanding of design in the world and like design outside of digital design. And that's Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. You guys have probably heard of it. Really good book. And then lastly, here's a website I really like. It's called UXCell, like UXCEL. And that website has a bunch of quizzes that you can take. Like it's made by designers, and it's like you got these interactive quizzes you can take with gamification involved, and you have beginning, like quizzes for beginners, you have quizzes for experts, like advanced quizzes as well. So I still use that website to just like make sure I understand the terms, make sure I'm like staying up to date with design stuff. Yeah, so I guess the very last thing I want to get into, a couple of things, and then I promise I'll open it up to questions. But there are some things you can do to set yourself apart from the crowd. And I talked about those a little bit already, like be really good at Figma. Learning how to take feedback well is something that is definitely underrated. Like it's hard to take feedback well in the beginning. You're kind of defensive, and you don't want to be told your designs aren't good. But like as you get into the real world more, like it's definitely an asset to be able to take feedback well, because like you're not going to be perfect with your first iteration of your design. That's the whole point, is that collaboration and feedback like builds the best version of design. And then like as far as interviewing goes, I definitely recommend having a good story that you rehearse, like put together about your journey, and make it interesting and like make it unique to you if you can. And then just like when you're interviewing, it's very important to be genuinely excited about product design. That comes across in the interview. And if you can show that, that'll help a lot. Cool. I think that's pretty much it for now. I know that was a lot of information, but I would love to open it up to questions and see what you guys have to say.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Joey. Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah.
You mentioned getting comfortable with feedback, which I think for many folks can, especially early on, no matter, what career you're in, can be a challenge. And I'm curious if you'd be open to sharing a little bit about like how you sort of built that. It's a skill, really, right? Like being able to receive feedback, hear what the person is sharing with you, not take it personally, and really use it to kind of to learn from and grow from. So I'm curious what your experience has been with getting more comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So just in the very beginning, like it gets easier, I guess, every year to get better at accepting feedback. So what I mean by that is I still have a hard time with it. I think a lot of people do. But how do you overcome that? So in the beginning, like there's no way you're going to be a great designer. So just know that feedback is only going to help you. Like no matter what you think, it's going to help you because you just don't have as much experience as somebody who's giving you feedback. And really that's like what I try to always remember is like, even if I'm for some reason so set that this design, this solution is the one, there's no way it could be any better than this. Like I've thought about everything and this is what it's got to be. That's never like a good place to be in, because there's no way that you as only one person can see the best solution. There's so many other ways to look at things that other people can bring to the table. And so it's just important to like know that if you constantly assume that there's more to be said, there's more solutions that could be designed, and there's more opinions to be had, like you're only going to get better and better, and not bring ego into like your everyday work. So I just think that's something you want, so if you think about it like that, it's going to incentivize you to stay humble and accept feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. Well, we've got a bunch of questions that have come in. So I thought I would jump in and help to kind of like wade through them. We have a couple of questions kind of going back to the fundamentals around product design versus UX versus UI. So we've got somebody that asked a question, since product design consists of UX and UI plus other things, is it true that there are different types of product designers who tend to focus on one or the other? And then the second part to that question was like, what is your, do you have a place where you personally like to focus?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was kind of afraid somebody might ask the product design versus UX UI designer question. So I at least Googled it because I wanted a good answer. And I found a pretty good link here. It says, and then I'll get into the rest of the question, but the difference between a product designer, UX UI designer: product designers are involved in the entire design process of a product, while UX designers focus more on the hands-on design portion of the process. You can think of a product designer as like the start to finish, end-to-end person responsible for, it always depends, but responsible for starting with research, coming up with all of the UX tools in your toolkit that you want to use, doing the UI, meaning like coming up with the designs in Figma or Sketch or other, and testing it. And it's just a full end-to-end process. I've never had a UX designer role, just that role. I've always had both in my jobs, but I understand that to be more focused on the UX processes versus the actual high fidelity, very UI focused role of a UI designer. And I'm sorry, could you maybe repeat the second half of that question? I want to make sure I get that.
Yeah, of course. The second half of the question was like where you personally like to focus if you do.
Yeah, so I like the UI side of things. I really like working in Figma. And I feel like that is going to be a large part of what goes into this role. Working in Figma, like literally building screens, having all of your design principles down that you can show visually, like that's easy to show, that's easy to work on, versus like sometimes the UX processes, they're very important, but that's harder to show and harder to do on the day-to-day. So that's why I think UI is so prevalent and so important as well.
Awesome. Yeah. While you're kind of on the topic of like your interests and what you're doing, we've got a question here about can you get into more of what you do on a day-to-day basis? Like what does your kind of day-to-day in your work right now look like?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. That's really good. Yeah, so like I said, Flatiron's been great. When I got started, right now, I'll just talk about right now. So like one of the kind of long-term projects has been, we have a design system. A design system is, we look at it from an atomic perspective. So like if I'm working in Figma, you have your atoms, you have your molecules, you have your organisms, you have kind of these like chunks that make up finally what you see on the screens. And so that's really important to have that in an organization. Like that is super important. And so we already have a design system that our designer Drew, who is awesome, has made. He's like the senior product designer, and right now I've been making a light mode version of it. So he designed it in dark mode, which means like, yeah, I'm sure you guys know what that is. It's like a dark background. It's very nice looking, but I'm working on a light mode version of it, which is kind of interesting because usually you start with a light mode version and you design a dark mode version. So I've just been recreating that design system, which is basically like roughly inverting the colors so that everything appears well on a light background, and the contrast standards are met so that colors are still readable, or words are still readable, colors are still accessible, all that stuff. That's been a long-term project. Right now, we just started on a new cycle. And that's a whole nother thing I won't get into right now, but we basically just started on a new project, and it's been honestly really tricky. It's been tricky for everybody because you can't really start solving a problem until you can define the problem. And that's kind of the fun part, is like, we're trying to just figure out what is the problem, how do we communicate with these words in the same language, just so we understand what we're talking about, because we're still forming this problem. And then, okay, now that we understand like the problem, how do we start designing that solution for it? Basically, so to get specific, there's a document system that students need to be able to upload documents to Flatiron. So they need to be able to send in like their resume. They need to be able to send in their high school graduation certificate. Those documents are important. The Flatiron School gets those. It's not as simple as you would think. So those need to be uploaded manually by the student, but also a compliance manager, the operations person, can go ahead and request those from a student, or they can manually upload it from a student. So how do we make that relationship work between two different user groups, and how do we make that a seamless experience for everybody involved? Also, on top of just like file uploads, there's DocuSign things that need to be signed by students. So obviously, when you get started at a boot camp, you have to sign, paperwork. And so how do we incorporate that into like one website and make it seamless and make it easy to use, so that compliance managers get the documents they need from students, students can upload the documents themselves, and everything works perfectly. And we have to do that with like legacy systems as well. So this is our new way of how we want to do it. We have to make sure the old way of doing it still works with everything that we're doing that's new. So it definitely gets complicated.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. So related to your day-to-day, I've got a little bit more of a granular question that came in, and you've touched on this a little bit, but what are some tools that you use when coming up with new products, and how do you beat writer's block?
Yeah.
Totally. I guess idea block, right?
Yeah. It's hard to come up with ideas sometimes. I mean, it's so like with music and with design, like as simple as this sounds, like literally just taking a break from it helps a lot. So you'd be surprised how if on Monday I sit down and I have no ideas, and then, or I'm really confused about the problem itself and the solution. Tuesday, I come back, I have like maybe one good idea, and I started to understand the problem better. And then by today, Wednesday, for example, I'm finally starting to understand like what we're kind of doing. And now I've got more ideas. So literally just like taking a break from it and coming back to it, checking back in on how you feel about your solutions helps a lot. Actually coming up with ideas, I definitely recommend just doing a lot of research, like going on Dribble and looking for inspiration. That sounds like pretty common, but it definitely helps to like see how other people have done it on Dribble, to see like UI solutions and to get inspired by those. That's if you have nothing that you can think of, like you're gonna find some ideas that other people have done on Dribble. And then just like using apps on your phone or thinking about something that's similar to the app that so if you're trying to come up with a new app that allows you to watch movies, or shows, you're going to think of like Netflix and all these competitors. And so those are going to get you started at least. And then you can kind of go from there and try to come up with new ideas. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough sometimes to think of new ideas. That's why it's good to collaborate and have other people jump in, and you start to sort of build together.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your experience there. So now we're gonna kind of switch gears back to kind of a couple of job and career related questions that have come in. So this person asked, and I feel like this is a common one, especially when you're somebody that's like new to an industry. And a lot of times when we're looking at job postings, they require experience that maybe a new person doesn't have. So the question coming in is, did you still apply to jobs that required 2 to 3 years of product design experience? Like, how did you sort of navigate that during your own job search?
Yeah, it's super tough. So there's not a whole lot of jobs out there that are like literally titled junior UX designer, junior product designer wanted. There's like barely any of them, which sucks. And that's just because, well, we won't get into why that is, because that's not the question, but it's a shame. There should be more like junior positions available. A lot of them are like 2 to 3 years of experience that you'll see on LinkedIn and stuff. And definitely apply to those. I mean, like that's the entry level position is 2 to 3 years. They don't really list less than that, because everybody wants somebody with experience. And that's a big problem. It's a big problem in the design world right now. But apply to those, because you definitely still have a shot. There's so many junior designers, meaning like you have maybe a year or two of experience. Like I'm still a junior designer pretty much. And there's so many of those floating around that eventually these companies realize, like, all right, I guess, we can't hire, like, senior designers are not going to fit the bill for this. Like we just need to hire a junior designer. And then they just kind of realize that's the case. But yeah, just apply to those. But again, like, it's going to be tough to get your foot in the door if you're just cold applying to jobs. It's super, super important to network. And I mean, network by, I forgot to post about this awesome networking or like mentor. ADP list. I think it's ADP list. But like, that's a great way to network, because you can like get paired up with a mentor, and it's kind of a low key way to, like, if they can help you and you can help them, and you guys have a rapport and you meet, a few times, like they might offer you a job or let you know about an open position at the company. And that's huge. So like networking like that, talking to recruiters is huge on LinkedIn. They want to get you a job. That's their job. So definitely talk to them. And also just reach out to random people on LinkedIn. A lot of them might not get back to you because they're busy and they're not trying to change jobs or help you right now, but like definitely reach out to them and see if they can help you out, like senior designers who can give you advice, but also just like hiring managers, other recruiters, people who work at the company that you want to work for. If you know a company you want to work for, like talk to those designers at those companies and just start networking that way too.
Yeah, it really seems like whether you're new, whether you're experienced, regardless of the industry, like that networking and making connections can be a really huge benefit when it comes to looking for a job for sure. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
We have another question that I'm curious because I feel like everybody I talk to kind of has a different opinion about this one. The question is, where do you find startups to work for free to gain experience?
I got reached out to. I was kind of lucky. Um, it was a cool startup. Like I really liked the mission and the product at the time. So maybe you'll get reached out to, but if you're trying to find startups to work for, that's a good question. I know like a website where I was applying to startups that needed a designer, but they weren't, that wasn't like volunteer. Um, Trying to think if there's like a resource I came across. Honestly, just putting it out there like on LinkedIn might help. I think that's a pretty good idea. So like if you're on LinkedIn and you offer your services for free, you'd be surprised how many people might like hit you back up and definitely allow you to get some experience. And then that way you're already on a networking website, so you might be able to turn that into a job too. But yeah, the LinkedIn algorithm for like posts blowing up seems really good. So I think if you did that, you might actually get a lot of engagement on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. We have another question from someone about like the freelancing prospects in the product design industry and like what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I saw that. I can't really say too much about that because I haven't actually freelanced as a product designer or as a UX designer, but I was this close to doing it. Like if I didn't get a job, I was gonna say I'm gonna get on Fiverr or Upwork or some of those popular freelancing websites. I'm gonna say I'm a UX UI designer because I do have this experience, and I'm gonna find a rate that's like pretty low, like whatever it needs to be, just so I can level up and get paid a little bit for my work and like build my portfolio. That was going to be my next move if I couldn't land a full-time job. So I think that's definitely a great thing to do. I think that shows a lot of initiative. And if you have a lower rate, like don't feel like you're not good enough to be a freelancer and do that work for somebody who needs it. Like it's only going to make you better. You have a very fair rate, hopefully, and that's just a great way to get better. So
Yeah, great suggestions. So I've got another, I think this is the last question that I see so far. So if any of you folks have burning questions that you haven't heard Joey talk about that you want answers to, now's the time. But so this question pertains to just sort of like, education requirements, which you may or may not be familiar with. So totally cool if you're not. But the person asks, did you get a master's or did you just do the boot camp? Are there different education requirements for UX research that you're aware
of? Yeah, so I don't know a whole lot about UX research. I think researchers, UX, UI designers, product designers, it's all kind of the same requirements to get those jobs. Like you don't need a master's degree, you don't need a PhD or anything like that. That's kind of what I found. I think it definitely helps. I think if you have a master's degree in design or a bachelor's, like that helps for sure. But what they really care about, is your portfolio. I know that for a fact. They care about how great your designs look and how you can communicate your design thinking. So a degree of any sort isn't going to be a deal breaker for you getting a job. It's going to be your portfolio and your interview skills that are going to be the deal breaker. So I don't have a degree or a master's in design. I just have a bachelor's in management and music business. So you can do it. You can do the boot camp with no experience for sure.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Very, very encouraging for sure. Question in the chat. Do you still play music? Was it a choice of one or another, or is it something that you are still involved with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I definitely still do music regularly. I'm actually about to put out my second album in July, which is really fun. It's been like 2 years since I've been working on it. And I make time for it. You know, it doesn't really change much. If anything, I'm putting a lot less pressure on myself than I was, because now I don't have to do music to survive. I can do it because I love it and because it's what I'm always going to do. So I do still like actually do it as a career. I play shows here and there, like as a performer and DJ, but I'm not like touring regularly or anything. It's what I love to do mostly is like produce music and put it out with under my artist name. So that's definitely what I'm still doing. Yeah, I would be open to hearing my music. I'll throw a link in. I'll throw a link in right now. Let me get my Spotify pulled up.
Awesome. Yeah, somebody in the chat is saying, I felt torn, feeling like I have to choose between one or the other, but I share the same passion. So seeing someone in the same steps is very inspiring. Awesome.
Yeah, it's tough, guys. You know, like picking a career is tough. But there's so many things you can do. I think for a career, like there's not just like one thing you can or should do for a career. And I think it's cool to kind of
Oh, I'm not sure if the connection issues are on my end or on Joey's. Oh, okay. It looks like it's Joey. Okay, well, we'll take a minute and wait for Joey to come back. But I will, while we're waiting, I will kind of tag on to what he was kind of starting to talk about, which is like, I personally, in my own career journey, am a firm believer in multi-potentialites. So that, you know, it's possible to do multiple things concurrently. Some folks, you know, change careers in succession. If y'all are curious to learn more about it, recommend checking out Emily Wapnick's TED Talk on multi-potentialites. My brain kind of exploded when I watched that TED Talk. I was just like, oh, that's a thing. I had no idea that was even a possibility, that you know, I don't have to just pick one thing and only stick to that. And I think more and more there are people that are choosing that path, right? And having sort of like slash careers where they have multiple different things that they're doing for work. Let's see, I'm just looking in the chat as we are hanging out to see if Joey makes it back. I'm wondering if maybe he lost a connection there, but it does look like he shared his Spotify in the chat if folks are curious to learn or to listen, I guess, to his music, which is very cool. Let's see, what else do we have going on? Oh, Wendelin, I'm glad it was helpful. Oh, the TED Talk again, the speaker's name here, I'll put it in the chat. Actually, let me Google it. While we're hanging out, we might as well. Emily also wrote a book about this too. So if you're like really nerdy like me and you want to dig in even more, there's a lot more out there. Here we go. Here is the TED Talk. Why some of us don't have one true calling. I was, like I said, my brain exploded when I found this TED Talk. I just was like, oh, wow, this is incredible. Let's see. What else? Are there questions I can answer? Oh, that's a great question, Repeat, about contributing to you in your portfolios. How did you stand out using your own personal background? That is a fantastic question. While I certainly can't answer for Joey, I can certainly say that's something that as a student here, you will have the opportunity to talk to your career coach about at length. We also have a great sort of like career coaching curriculum that you can jump into and really dig into how to kind of use not only your past professional experience, but also just like you said, you and who you are and what sort of unique qualities you can bring to your job. And I see that Joey is back. Welcome back, Joey. I've been chatting with folks about multi-potentialites and the possibilities around like doing multiple things, which I think you were kind of starting to talk about from your own experience. And then we had a question that came in, but I'll let you kind of, if you want to, I don't know if you want to pick up where you left off, if you want to kind of keep moving. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me right now? That was really weird.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally can hear you.
I think my internet provider just like shut down for a second because everything like quit on me.
Oh my goodness.
But glad I'm back. I was like, what just happened? Okay. So yes, I don't really remember the last thing we were just kind of talking about was just like, yeah, you don't have to give one thing up to do this career. And I think it was great to see. I can't see the chat history now, but I was seeing before all of the creative passions you guys have. And yeah, I'll throw my Spotify link in here really quick. I think the chat just kind of messed up as well. But yeah, any other questions? I would love to hear from you guys, but I understand if we've already covered a lot.
Yeah, there's another question that came in that I started to field, but I'm sure they would be curious to know your perspective on it. Repeat asks, what are some tips for contributing to you in your portfolios? How did you stand out using your own personal background? I think that's a fantastic question.
Yeah, so I really did leverage, I leveraged like my business background and my music background. When I was interviewing, you know, I thought the music background made my situation a little bit unique. And I tied a lot of like how music is similar to design into my interviews, which definitely helped. But also like going back to the business background. So, you know, I have a business degree. I started my own business while I was doing music. And that led to a lot of, and even having a music career, you have to have a business acumen because it's all about how you market yourself. And like, I had so many different things I was involved in as a music producer to like make fans and keep fans and have an email list of fans. And like I mentioned a little bit about like rolling out merch and promoting on social media a certain way, like having that business understanding. You know, I remember watching a Mizco video about designers who talk about having business acumen and understanding that you know, if you can prove as a designer that you have an understanding of what makes a company money, like things that are important, how do we make stakeholders happy? How do we satisfy the senior designers, the product managers? How do we bring the business goals together to solve a problem, but also be profitable in the designs that you're making? So like that's very attractive to the people that are interviewing you. And so if you can brush up on some of your business skills, I think that helps. And also just, this is important. This is what I wanted to say. So like, if you have a case study in your portfolio and you actually did something, that you actually designed something and put it out there, and you have KPIs, you have like metrics that you can prove, like, okay, after we put out this design or design this app, we had this many users sign up. This is the amount of money we generated. If you had revenue, like that's huge. That's everything. And the bad news is that's hard to sometimes get from a project. That's hard to actually put that out there and have those metrics that you can brag about. But if you freelance, I guess, or if you even if you work at a startup and you have some of those metrics that you can prove before you get your job, that's going to be super valuable.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I see we are getting close to the end of our time. We've got 2 minutes. If anybody has a last minute question, I will pause to see if there are any questions that come in. But I mean, you have shared so much amazing advice and just been so open with like sharing your own personal journey and your experience, and just want to express my appreciation. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, so happy to. I want to do more of this and definitely like help in any way I can for junior designers. So yeah, absolutely, guys. Super happy to. good luck to everybody, and congrats on beginning this journey or thinking about it. It's so awesome. It's a big step and it's totally worth it. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and you got it. Just keep going. Best of luck.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us. And as always, I love to thank our curious question askers. Lots of really thoughtful questions, which always make these events more interesting and engaging. So thank you all so much for being such a great audience. Oh, it looks like there's a request. Can we add to LinkedIn?
You can add me on LinkedIn if that's the question.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that is the question.
Joey Tuholski. Yeah, I think that's my name on LinkedIn. So just definitely hit me up.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks again, Joey. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.